Hello YouTube, it is your boy B3 back with another kicking movie reaction review. Today we do a pretty interesting one. It's just another exploitation horror monstery movie, you know how I love those. It's called Axe Giant, aka Axe Giant, The Wrath of Paul Bunyan. And it answers the question we've all been asking ourselves our entire lives. What if Paul Bunyan was a horror movie? What if the legend of Paul Bunyan was horror? Oh boy. I used to have this Paul Bunyan VHS that I really liked as a kid. That's not really relevant. It's got 3 stars on Prime Video. You can watch it for quote unquote free if you have a subscription. It's about an hour and a half, 3.5 on IMDb. It's from 2013, rated R. Here's the read up. Young adults at a first time offenders boot camp discover that the legend of the giant lumberjack Paul Bunyan is real, but is much more horrifying than they could have imagined. It's actually a little weird because at the beginning of the film they say it's the first time they're doing this camp, and then later in the movie they say that the camp has been done before. So I think that was something that got lost in editing. Directed by Gary Jones, starring Amber Connor, Joe Estevez, Dan Haggerty. It's a horror film, as I said. Supporting actors Thomas Downey, Tim Lovelace, Jesse Cove, Christina Kopf, and Jill Evan. Produced by Jason Okonya, Gary Jones, and Jeff Miller. It's from ITN Movies. It's got drug use, foul language, nudity, sexuality, and violence. I like how there's a 5-star review on here that says not great but good enough. Not great but good enough, but you gave it 5 stars? Whatever. Anyways, this film is probably an easy miss if you're not a big like horror monster fan. It's kind of just a regular exploitation film that takes advantage of the legend of Paul Bunyan. And spoilers from this point onward. All these young people that are first-time offenders are sent to this camp. One person's just there for contempt of court because she didn't want to testify, because if she testified, the person she testified against said they'd hurt her daughter. So she didn't want to testify, and since she didn't want to testify, they held her in contempt of court. I don't think that's how that works. Also, the contempt probably would have been for maybe like a night in jail, but this is a week-long camp. So that one was a little weird. But I knew that character would die instantly because they mentioned they had a daughter, and that, of course, means they're going to die. In fact, I called every death in this film, not before it happened, but like at the beginning of the film. At the beginning of the film, I was like, okay, the female counselor will live, and the girl that was introduced separately from everybody else will live because she was introduced separately from everybody else. Yeah. So they go on this camping thing, and they find the skeleton of a giant ox, and they take one of its horns. And that turns out to be Babe the Blue Ox, Paul Bunyan's only friend. And because they disturbed his resting place, Paul Bunyan goes on a killing spree to kill them all as payback. And Paul Bunyan himself is sympathetic. He has a very weird story. But if Paul Bunyan didn't want the place disturbed, why didn't he bury the ox? Why did he just leave its corpse on top of a pile of rocks? Why didn't he bury it? Like, I know he has the mind of a child in this movie, but he seems to be capable of cooking and sharpening an axe and fashioning things for himself, even though he has the mind of a child. So I think he's capable of digging, especially if he's a lumberjack. Like it's manual labor either way, and he obviously has enough intelligence to understand the concept of burying someone who's dead. But they disturb that resting place. He starts killing him. Then an old mountain man tells them the story, and the story is that Paul Bunyan was born with a rare disorder that would make him live 3 times longer than everybody else, and he also would never really stop growing. So by age like 6, he was that tall. By age like 5 or 6, he was over 6 feet tall and doing lumberjack work as a kid, because 1800s. and like he was so good at it because he was so strong because he had that, you know, special strength that a bunch of legends were started about him, and they kept the legends going after they locked him up because people killed his ox and ate his ox, and he slaughtered them all, and so they captured him, and it's. I guess they thought a jail wouldn't hold him, so they put him in an old mine and then blew up the entrance and left him to die inside a mine. But he was really strong, so he escaped and he ran up to the top of the mountain to live out his life. But he was like just a little bigger than a normal human then, so all the stories about him being a real giant were actually made before he was a real giant. So like the legend has like a basis of truth. And so he kept growing, became like an actual giant that was like 4 times taller than anybody else. And he goes on this killing spree. And he is sympathetic. I think lots of good monsters are sympathetic monsters, like Frankenstein's monster often is. Because, like, his only friend in the world died. But also, like, Paul's definitely in the wrong. Like, he's definitely in the wrong. Like, he made the choice to murder. And that's wrong. But also, he's not capable of thinking for himself. He's not in his right mind. He shouldn't have been doing lumberjack work. Like, he has the mind of a child. He's mentally disabled. So you do feel bad for him, especially when he's being put down in the end. Like, at the end of the film, like, this militia shows up to put him down. And it was actually foreshadowed pretty well. Normally, if, like, a random militia just showed up and killed Paul Bunyan at the end of the movie, I would have been like, what? But it was foreshadowed twice, at least. So that's good. That's good. Nice thinking ahead. Nice job thinking ahead. A lot of these movies don't foreshadow, like, anything. Like, for real. So that was good. It's nice to see a militia doing something good instead of, like, committing terrorist acts like I often see these days. So that's nice. Because there are some legitimate militias in this world. Most of the ones you see on the news are white supremacist militias, but it's nice to see, like, a normal, just militia, I guess. So, yeah, it's a fun movie. It's got some cool kills. It's got some good effects. It's got a good mix of practical and digital effects. It's digital where it needs to be, and it's practical where it needs to be, and that's good. He looks nice with his giant standing next to him. Like, the giant is a person in a suit. He kind of looks like he kind of looks a little like Victor Crowley. He's a little like Victor Crowley. He's got a hunchback like me. It's a cool monster suit. It's a very cool monster suit. I really do like it. I'd buy the action figure. It's a very cool monster suit. I do like the Axe Giant. And it's a fun movie. So if you're a fan of horror exploitation films, I definitely check it out. The acting's not too bad. There was this one character who was, like, always talking back to the cops and stuff. And, like, the drill sergeant was like, I know your type. You're like all talk, but if anything ever really happened to you, you would not be able to handle it. And that's true, because he openly admitted that he ratted out a bunch of people to get this deal, because he was the biggest offender. He was, like, selling drugs. And then as soon as his life was threatened, he, like, couldn't handle it. He was, like, holding a knife so tight that it was cutting him, and he freaked out. And then when the mountain man told him, he was like, you have to return the horn, and maybe Paul Bunyan will forgive you. Like, the first thing he does is take the horn and chuck it into the woods. And he's like, take it back. He, like, freaks out and doesn't think about it and just runs out and chucks it into the woods. And then he gets a cool kill. This was really a slasher film with Paul Bunyan as the slasher. Really. Pretty wild. But there is a twist where the mountain man betrays them because he knows that if they get out of there alive, then they're going to bring people back to kill Paul Bunyan. And Paul Bunyan's, like, the only person he has with him up in the mountains, so he'd be all alone. Uh, so that's nice. It was. I kind of had a feeling he would do that anyways. I was like, this guy's not going to be that helpful because he was acting like Paul Bunyan wouldn't kill him, and I don't think Paul Bunyan would have killed him if he didn't point the gun at the character who was the spitting image of the woman Paul Bunyan was quote unquote sweet on as a kid, which is a little weird because I know he was the size of an adult, but he was a child and mentally disabled, like heavily special needs person. And I feel like she might have been taking advantage of him if she actually like got with him. But yeah, it's an enjoyable film if you like slashers, if you like monsters, if you like exploitation horror, or just horror in general. Axe Giant or Axe Giant: The Wrath of Paul Bunyan from 2013 will be a film that I think you'll enjoy. It's fun, and I'm glad I watched it. So that's it for Axe Giant, directed by Gary Jones. The 3-star rating on Prime Video I do agree with. Once again, if you have a Prime Video subscription or you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it for no extra cost. But that's it. Thank you all very much for your support. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Check out all the cool links in the description below, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And I'll see you all next time.